Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jules and Brendon Traxler.
Welcome back to another episode of Colonize the Ocean, the podcast. My name is Adam Jules, and with me, once again, is the founder of Colonize the Ocean, and also the founder of Atlantic Sea Colony, Brendon Traxler. Brendon, how are you doing today?
I am super. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. A little background on us: we have to work remotely from each other, and you live in a much, we're not going to give personal details, but you live in a much warmer climate than I do. You live in the southern United States, and I live in the northern United States. And right now I'm on the cusp of winter, and where I'm recording right now, I'm shivering. But I have a feeling that you had a pretty good day today, probably in the 70s, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I got my shorts on right now.
Yeah, so we, when it comes to that, like, I kind of hate you sometimes because I get a lot of messages like about how hot it is there, and you usually send it to me, I don't know, November, December, a lot of times. So not a fan, but I guess that's the price we deal with for working remotely with each other.
See, but the thing is that shortly it won't matter any difference because we'll be living in an underwater habitat somewhere. So it's all climate controlled then, so it won't make any difference.
You're working on doing some pretty good segues. I like it.
Uh-huh.
Getting into the show. Either that or you just didn't want to have any banter with me. That's fine. I get it. But yes, you are right. Today we are continuing the topic of underwater habitats. With episode 1, we talked about the past habitats. Basically, they all kind of started in the 60s up until the 80s. And correct me if I'm wrong. That seems to be a pretty common term of mine, but correct me if I'm wrong, Brendon. A lot of those ones that we talked about in episode 1, none of them are around really anymore, right? A lot of them, like, it kind of seems, have been put in like museums and stuff now.
Yeah, and even some of the ones we're going to talk about today are no longer underwater or around. But it was a hard time to take a break on what was current and what's not. And 80s doesn't really seem current, but some of the ones that are still in existence started in the 80s. So current is 80s till today, I guess. And I think about half what we're going to talk about still are in existence in some way or another.
Yeah, and we kind of said in episode 1 that we were going to do an episode about the current ones, and then we were going to do an episode about the future ones, but we kind of decided that we're actually going to combine current and future habitats in this episode. So we're going to jump into those. And a quick note, we kind of had a little side conversation about this before we started recording. Now, we want to kind of make a distinction here about underwater habitats and underwater, I guess, structures. Because what we're trying to focus on is habitats that are actually submerged and actually have to take, I guess for the most part, you have to dive to get to these, or there's a special way of getting to them where there's a lot of that you're seeing now where people are advertising underwater hotels and underwater restaurants and whatever it may be, but really it's kind of a cheat in the way that it's just a building that is extended into the ocean or extended into a body of water. Now they're very cool nonetheless. It's just we want to focus on kind of like structures and habitats that are actually off the coast a little bit. Am I explaining that pretty good, Brendon? I
guess the simplest way is are they submerged or not? Completely submerged, I think would be the defining factor. Whereas I think one or two of the ones you're talking about is the Morocco, which is over in the Fijis, which once again, it's beautiful water, beautiful location, but the only underwater part is a bedroom that you walk down some stairs to get into. And again, beautiful, and I'm not taking anything away from them because once again, it's a segue, and it's getting people acclimated to, hey, living underwater, even if it's just spending the night in a room underwater, And then starting in later this year off of Australia, Cruise with Sundays is going to have something very similar to that, where they've got a anchored boat where it's got a bedroom underwater where you can go and stay in. So even though those are cool and they are being, marketed as underwater hotels, we aren't classifying those as such just because they're not completely submerged.
Okay, so kicking off, let's talk about, what is still technically around and still open. And we'll put a little asterisk on that as a matter, in the terms of open. So the first one we have here is Aquarius. And that one is 5.5 miles, 9 kilometers off of Key Largo. It was opened in 1986, and it's at a depth of 62 feet or 19 meters. This, however, is only open to the science community. Brendon, you got more that you'd like to kind of speak on? I know you've kind of told me about it in the past. What all has been kind of done there?
I mean, a lot. It is the only current existing underwater habitat that's actually out in the ocean that's open up to the science community. Classrooms. Fabien Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau's grandson, several years ago, he did a 30-day mission there. Ownership has been passed around over the years just to keep it open, but it is to this currently the one of the only 2 underwater habitats that are still in existence that are open to people to get to. So it holds a special place in this conversation just because of that alone.
Right. And the next one we'll talk briefly about is Marine Lab. That one was opened in 1984 at 8.3 meters or 27 feet down. And that was just a real recent retired habitat. It was retired in 2018 and has been turned into a museum. What kind of life did that live, Brendon?
It was similar. I mean, it had been around obviously since the 80s as well, and was another science habitat. It was not as big as Aquarius, but it still served its purpose in the science community, and was pulled out of the water, like you said, in 2018. And now you can go and see it. It's down in Florida, and is being used to educate the next generation. They have a bunch of different classes and stuff like that they hold with different schools and stuff along those lines to educate the public about ecology, ocean conservation, and underwater habitation as well.
And where was this one submerged at? Was it in Florida as well?
It was, yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to go ahead and take the next one? Do you want to talk about La Chalupa, a.k.a. Jules Undersea Lodge?
Sure. Yeah, it was originally known as La Chalupa, which was a science, again, another science habitat back in the 70s. Ian Koblick, who wrote the Living and Working in the Seas, the book which I have read. I think that most people interested in this topic have read, or if they haven't, they definitely need to read, because it is the current one of the tell-alls to underwater habitation that's been wrote to this point in time. But anyway, Ian, he developed and operated La Chalupa back in the 70s. Once it ran its course as a science habitat in the 80s, it got transformed into Jules Undersea Lodge and was put in Key Largo, Florida. Since that time, it's been open to the general public, where you can go spend the night. You can go dive it. You don't even have to spend the night there. You just go dive down to the thing, spend some time there, and come up. Whatever. It's great for like honeymoons or just a getaway. Over 10,000 people have spent the night in the 30 years that it's been in operation. It's only around 30 feet underwater, so it's an easy dive to get to, and it's definitely one of those bucket list places for people right now, especially if you're a scuba diver. And if not, they can even certify you there at the location, so anybody that's physically capable of doing so can go spend the night there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and one of the cool features they have there is, say you're staying the night there, they actually deliver pizza to you down there as well.
They do. Yep, they do. That is pretty cool.
Now, I don't have the exact numbers, but we've kind of looked at this before. I want to say, like, give or take, like, for a couple to stay the night down there, or what? Yeah, I think it was like for like a couple to stay the night, like in that $600 a night ballpark range.
That's a cheap range. I mean, once again, it depends on, are you wanting the place to yourself, all these different, how long you want to stay. There's a bunch of, but if you go to the Jules website, which again will be in the notes of this episode, we'll have the links to it as well. It has all the pricing and stuff there, but I would guesstimate you'd be safe to say $1,000 a night to stay there.
Yeah, and when you first kind of think that, you're like, oh wow, that seems kind of like a lot. But we talked about the hotel room in Fiji, the one that you can just walk to, and that's in the thousands of dollars per night range. It's way up there. So this is actually really cool and a much more affordable option for people that want to experience that kind of thing. Plus, like I said, pizza. So I mean, that's got to be the best selling point to it.
To each their own, I guess.
I didn't have supper tonight, so like I just have pizza on my mind. So sorry. Do you want to go ahead and talk about Scott Carpenter's Space Analog Station?
Sure. Scott Carpenter Space Analog Station, if I can spit it out there. We talked about Scott Carpenter in the last episode. He was an astronaut and also an aquanaut back in the 60s. Dennis Chamberlain, friend of the show, and Joseph Bishop, this was their habitat. It was a NASA project back in the late 90s. It was a 6 weeks mission where they developed this underwater habitat, and it worked. And we'll talk about Dennis Chamberlain and what he's working on more. And we're even trying to get him on the show right now too. So he might be a potential guest in the future we'll get to talk to, and he'll be able to dive into a little bit more about this. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to let him talk about it.
Yeah, and like you said, we'll definitely get him on and let him talk about it. But this goes back to our conversation about having that relationship between space exploration, space research, and having that relationship with the underwater research, underwater habitats. And then I'm just gonna keep passing it off to you. Tell me about Lloyd Godson's Biosub.
Sure. So this one, once again, this was a little bit in the gray area because it was more of a controlled environment, but it was a habitat of sorts where he was able to generate his own electricity. He had like a stationary bike, his own water, and his own air using algae that produced the O2. So it was, the whole purpose of it was to test these self-sufficiencies of living underwater. And for all intents and purposes, it did what it was set out to do. This was back in 2007. So it wasn't that long ago. It was a short-lived thing, but it achieved its goal.
Okay, so that's kind of like what we have in the current realm for what we're talking about. And I'll make a little quick sidebar, and I'm going to go on a really quick rant. But we kind of talked about 4 habitats in the recent category, or current. And really only 2 of those are in circulation right now, and with only one of them actually being open to the public. So you kind of see where Brendon and I's passion is for Colonize the Ocean, and to continue the goal of being able to live underwater and have more options and more habitats underwater where we can, share the ocean. Obviously, we're not going to go into a tangent about, we don't want to obviously destroy or disrupt anything, but we want to move forward with that. So in the past episode we talked about like 10 different habitats that were around in the 60s, 70s, where now we're down to kind of like 1. So you kind of see where Brendon and I's drive is coming from. So moving forward, we're going to talk about a few different topics. Now, Brendon, I'm going to let you talk about all of these except Atlantis Sea Colony. I'm going to take that one because I just don't think you want to talk about yourself. So if you want to talk about the other 3, and then I'll talk about you on the last one. How about that?
Sure, that works. So with all these, I've actually had the opportunity to either via email or Facebook Messenger, or in one instance, phone call, speak to all these different people who have been involved in them, having been people who don't know that this is a 25-year passion project of mine to be a catalyst for underwater colonization. So I've reached out to people over the years. The first one, Poseidon Undersea Resorts. This was started by the president of U.S. Submarines, Bruce Jones, it's kind of been in limbo for the last several years. Nobody's really sure where we're at with it. It's supposed to have opened in 2008 and kept on getting pushed back. It's a pretty audacious. It was going to open over in Fiji, I believe, is the location, and it was multiple different hotel rooms and with a big like dining area and observation area. And the website still exists. You can still go check it out. But just like I said, just been no action whatsoever. They're looking at about $30,000 per couple per week. So on the higher end, especially when you're looking at Jules. But I think that the price was, for being in the Fiji waters and being a one of a kind, it was probably, well worth that dollar amount. But once again, we're not sure where it's at. Planet Ocean Underwater Hotel is another one that is very active and is currently hinting around that they're in the process of getting ready to start building. This is Tony Webb. He is the owner and the creator of this. He advertises it more being a habitat that it's mobile, so you can set it up in one place and then move it to another. He has it patented for this design, and he's wanting to situate it at about 24 to 30 feet in that, once again, that one atmosphere area underwater. And it's shooting for, I think he's looking around $6,000 a night. So still right around that $30,000 per week range, more or less. That seems to be that sweet spot. Again, like I said, depending on who you talk to, he's got a Facebook page, a Twitter. He's very active, and they're currently, he claims to currently be hiring to start this whole process. So we may be seeing something out of him pretty soon. Time will tell. Dennis Chamberlain, again, with the Scott Carpenter station, he's got a whole series called the Atlantica Expeditions, and he's got multiple different habitats planned. I know that he's got one that's close to him right now that he's been actively pursuing, and once again, when we get him on the show, we'll talk to him a little bit more. But he's in the same situation with some of these other people where it's a waiting game. With all these situations, and I can speak from experience here, that the technology exists and the ability to do it is there. It just all comes down to a dollar game at this point in time. And I think that's the biggest problem with some of these is, for the Poseidon Undersea resorts, and maybe even the case with Planet Ocean or Hotel, the scope is so large to start off with. The capital required to build something like this is enormous, maybe biting off a little bit more than they can chew at the beginning. And once again, I think these are questions that we'll definitely want to discuss with Dennis, who's been doing this longer than I have. So that's my take on why this has not happened to this point in time. But I am hopeful with the advent of Facebook and social media and social marketing and making the world a little bit smaller place and crowdfunding and those sort of situations that we are on the cusp of finally starting to see underwater habitats pop up and start to become the mainstream, even if it is the Maraca or Cruise with Sundays and these other underwater bungalows and hotel suites and stuff along those lines. It steps in the right direction. But since you don't want me to talk about Atlantic Sea Colony, Adam, go for it.
So Atlantic Sea Colony is something that I've, come up with many years ago, and I brought Brendon on to kind of help me with it.
Oh, yeah?
No. All right. So Atlantic Sea Colony is a, kind of like you mentioned earlier, a 25-year vision that Brendon has had for, like I said, 25 years, where I just recently got brought on with a project. Brendon and I have known each other for many years, but coming on to help him develop it. And what kind of separates Atlantic Sea Colony from some of these other ones we're talking about is that not only are we trying to accomplish, just single unit underwater habitats, like a hotel room or whatever, we want to actually try to accomplish building underwater homes and underwater hotels and underwater data centers, and just be able to literally use the term colonize the ocean, where we can, anything that you can really utilize and find on land, you'd be able to have access to underwater as well. Obviously wanting to start out basic, and hopefully the future takes us into a good place with that. But I don't know, does that seem like a pretty pretty good explanation of that, Brendon.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's going to happen. There's no question that underwater habitats will happen. It's just who's going to be the first one to market, who's going to be the one that is able to figure out that special sauce and make it work. Our thing is start small and make it almost cookie cutter to an extent. My personal opinion is that some of these guys started too big with no proof of concept or no easing into it. They just jumped all into it. And if they got the backing, they got the financials to do that, great for them. I don't have that kind of backing or financial ability to do so. So we're having to take a different approach and start off small and go in that way and then grow from there. So once again, I don't think there is a right or wrong way of doing it. As long as it gets done at the end of the day, that's really all I care. Because I want to see a world where that I can say that Atlantic Sea Colony had some impact into the future of underwater colonization.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of conversations, off the mic where you've been passionate about the idea that you just want to be able to see this type of endeavor continue, whether it's us or whether it's Planet Ocean Underwater Hotel, whether it's Atlantic Expeditions. Obviously, we want to be successful in our project, but one thing I've kind of learned, from talking with you and this community is that everybody kind of cheers each other on, where everybody kind of wants to see this happen. Everybody's got a different idea. Everybody's got a different concept, but at the end of the day, everybody kind of wants to see the future of underwater habitation and underwater colonization. So it's a lot of friendly competition, I think, would be a good term to use for it. Like you said, we stay in contact with these guys, and it's a friendly community, and we're all kind of shooting for the same thing.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I think that's the best way to put it. We've got the Earth. We're only using up 30% of the Earth on land, so there's plenty of real estate out there for whomever that can do whatever they can do to get habitats down there and get people. My whole thing is that I think that right now in 2019 and for the past several years and for the ongoing future, the ocean cleanup, keeping the ocean clean and pure is we're all about that. But I think that too often it's one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind. And if we can start bringing people underwater and to the water, however we do that, and they start seeing the effects that we have had on the ocean, I think that will help open eyes more than, somebody on TV or on YouTube or something like that talking about it. So that's always been my passion, is that I want to bring the ocean a little bit closer to your grandmother, your nephew, your niece, whomever. I don't think there should be a barrier like there currently is to people being able to go underwater. Right now, you have to be able to scuba dive if you want to get to Jules or to get to Aquarius. That shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't have to put a wetsuit on to have to spend the night underwater. And that is what my passion is to erase those lines.
Yeah, and that's, I think boost our bubble a little bit. We make a good partnership in the fact that we both share that same kind of passion where, like you said, out of sight, out of mind is kind of the outlook towards ocean conservation, where everybody says it's an issue, but very little people are directly impacted by it. If people were constantly dumping garbage in our yards or front lawns, we would be upset pretty darn quick because it's directly in front of us. So kind of like what you're saying, being able to get out there and, share the ocean with the marine life and just the ecosystem out there, being able to save and preserve it without having to destroy it. That's kind of our goal.
You got it.
Well, guys, on this episode, we talked about everything that's going on beneath the waves. So on our next episode, we're going to be talking about what's going on above the waves, we're going to get into seasteading. It is a community that's growing very rapidly. There is a lot of movement behind it, and hopefully we'll be able to talk with some people that are involved in the seasteading projects. So that'll be our third episode. Brendon, do you have anything else you want to say for this episode?
No, I don't. I mean, I guess I can close with saying that, I hope that the people who are listening to this and this is new to some of you, that you found us, however, and that you can help share that passion that we have. I think we're going to discuss further on after we talk about seasteading. We're going to discuss space and how it plays into it. And we are not trying to take anything away from that. This is not a competition. And I want people just to understand that this is our passion, and that we would love you to jump on board with us and follow us along this journey together.
For further information, guys, you can get a hold of us at colonizetheocean.com and email us at contact@Atlantis Sea Colony. If you want to check out more about Atlantis Sea Colony, you can go to atlantisseacolony.com and also use the social media as well. We're on Facebook at Atlantis Sea Colony. We're on Twitter at Atlantis Sea Colony. And we are on Instagram at Atlantis Sea Colony. We hope to hear from you guys through any venue that you want to get a hold of us, and we will see you on episode 3.